Good afternoon, everyone. Happiness. What is happiness? It is a state of emotional well-being that a person experiences either in a narrow sense when good things happen in a specific moment, or more broadly, as a positive evaluation of one's life and accomplishments overall, i.e. subjective well-being. Lots of research. Can you please go on mute? Thank you. I'm just going to mute a few people. Right, okay, so lots of research and studies have been done on happiness. Welcome to Umesh Shah Presents Sunday Life and Learn Talks. Our speaker today is Professor Nandini Chakrabarti, who will talk about how to use opportunities to achieve happiness. Professor Nandini Chakrabarti is a consultant psychiatrist in early intervention in psychosis with Leicestershire Partnership NHS Trust. She is also an honorary professor with the University of Leicester and currently the national lead for recruitment in psychiatry training. Without taking more time, Professor Nandini Chakrabarti, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and namaste, wherever you are in the world today. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Sunday afternoon. And it's a pleasure to be talking to you about this topic, which I think touches all our lives. Now, first of all, to put a few things in context before I start sharing my slides. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm not a life coach. I'm not a mentor. And the context of today's talk is not to give you tips to happiness, tips of things that have worked in my life, which I think will work for everybody else. I think one mistake we all make is that we think whatever has worked for us is going to work for everybody. The aim today is not to give you answers. I don't think anybody can give anyone else the answers for their life. This is about asking questions. This is about finding your own unique answers. What is it that you want of life? What is it that makes you happy? It's a quest. It's a journey. COVID has, with all the havoc it's wreaked around the world, it has definitely brought mental health and mental well-being to the forefront. There have been so many talks, so many things that we read on the net, so many webinars which have been arranged to talk about mental health and well-being, which is all very positive. But what I want to bring in this talk today is to talk about the evidence. Being a doctor, being a psychiatrist means that whatever I rely on has to be proved by research. It has to be proved by the science and evidence behind it. So whilst we all know what happiness means to us, whilst all of us try and search for that happiness in our lives, let's try and look at what research has been done and what research is ongoing, what the evidence and literature talks about. So I'm going to share my couple of slides, and I promise you they are not very many. I hope that will leave us time for a lot of interesting discussion on this topic. So this is about how to use opportunities to achieve happiness, taking control of your life. This picture is of Kairos, or Ceres, as Greek mythology would call him. He is the personification of opportunity. Some Greek myths also call him the youngest son of Zeus. And how does he personify opportunity? The interesting thing is that he's got a lot of hair on the front of his head, and he's completely bald behind. And that shows that when opportunity approaches you, faces you, You can grab it completely straight away. But the moment he passes away, he slipped by your hands. So opportunity is to be recognized as it is approaching you. If you want to grab the opportunity, you've got to grab it straight away. The moment it's passed, it's a lost opportunity. You do not have the capacity to go back and grab opportunity from the back. Opportunity is also always personified as a young God, as an ever-changing God. And that's because opportunity is young and beautiful, always fresh, always changing. Opportunity never stagnates. But what's the dictionary definition over here? Let's put things in context. So according to most business talk, most corporate world literature, it's a time or a set of circumstances that would make it possible to do something. And when we are thinking about business and the corporate world, we are talking about a chance for employment or promotion. That's the narrow way of looking at it. According to the Collins Dictionary, however, opportunity is a situation in which it is possible for you to do something that you want to do. And the question is, do we always realize what we want of life? When we say that I need this or I want to do this, is it actually us speaking, or do we speak for what we expect society to think of us, or what we think society and traditions and people around expect of us? Where is that balance? So there's opportunity, there's choice, and there's decision. Opportunity is the chance, the circumstance, the possibility of things happening. Choice is an option. When it comes to us, do I do this or do I do that? And then it is for us to take a decision. Which option do we choose? Which opportunity do we take? Are we going to make use of an opportunity or not when the circumstance arises? And then coming into happiness, where does happiness fit into it all? Now, a very interesting piece of ongoing research is the World Happiness Report, published every year around March, April time by the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. It's based on self-report questionnaires, which are widely circulated in over 150 countries. And the authors came up with 6 categories which explain the difference in happiness between countries. There is GDP, but it's not everything. There's social support, there's life expectancy, there's freedom to make life choices, generosity, and the perception of corruption levels. This is what research, this is what these authors think influences happiness in a wider scale, more than an individual scale. This is looking at it worldwide. Now, this is a research not without its critics, not without its skeptics. And I must say that when I first came across it, I did think about who exactly answers these questionnaires. Are these questionnaires translated? I don't know. Is there a selection bias in the people who respond to such questions? How do different cultures interpret the questions that have been put? Whenever something comes from WHO or United Nations, we always have it at the back of our minds. Is it culturally sensitive, or is this the Western concept of happiness being put on the Eastern and the Oriental world, on Asia and Africa? I'll share something else with you. Very interestingly, recently I got involved in another very small piece of research project from the Royal College of Psychiatrists. We are a bit concerned about the number of trained psychiatrists who are leaving the UK, going to other countries. And from the grapevine, we think that these countries, the most popular ones are Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Those are the ones that we seem to hear about more. Not sure about other specialties, but at least in psychiatry, they seem to crop up more and more. So we decided to look into it. Why are people leaving the UK for other health systems, for working in other countries? Now, you would think that brain drain is something we think about always in context of Asia losing lots of specialized people to Western countries, and the mindset, or again, the preconception, the assumption we have is that they are coming because of the money and the luxury that life offers over here. To think that even the United Kingdom can have brain drain is not something that comes automatically to us. But it is a problem. And it was completely on two different levels. I didn't think about the happiness report at all when I was looking at the information over there. What we decided as part of that research, before we started interviewing people, before we started looking at factors, we've got to look at the hard numbers. And the hard numbers in the sense of asking GMC on the basis of freedom of information, tell us how many psychiatrists are leaving the country every year and which countries are they going to. And though they couldn't give us perfect figures, they did the best that they could. And they gave us statistics over the last 5 years, so 2017 to 2021, December inclusive. And the top countries who were getting the largest number of psychiatrists from the UK were Australia, Canada, Republic of Ireland, New Zealand, and the United Arab Emirates, interestingly. And it was very much by chance, I would say, that whilst I was doing this piece of research, and that was at the back of my head, I came across the 2021 happiness report. And I looked at the list of the countries who were above the UK in the list. And I realized, it just came as a light bulb moment. Goodness, we are losing the largest number of psychiatrists to the countries, to the English-speaking countries who come above us in the happiness list. So the English-speaking countries above the UK in that list are currently Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. The only country above us which isn't getting that number of psychiatrists is the United States. The United States is still above the UK, but that can be explained as the United States having the most complicated medical registration system, which might make migration of doctors over there a bit more difficult. The outlier lying way below the UK is obviously the United Arab Emirates. But even within that, we found that United Arab Emirates is the happiest country in the Middle East, according to that list. So in spite of all the skepticism and in spite of our questions and criticism, and you'll find a lot on the net, it is interesting that there must be something in this report which is true, which rings true. I think we need to look a bit more into it. But whilst we are talking about opportunities, the fact that freedom to make life choices is something important that features on that happiness list is something to reflect on. And this is the list of countries, as I said. If you look at it, so we are number 17 according to the 2022 report. And look over here, as I said, United States is the only country above us which doesn't get that many number of doctors. And you have Canada, Ireland, Australia, and all the rest of the countries who are not getting that many psychiatrists from us, at least, are non-English speaking. Well, you do have New Zealand over there as well, English speaking. All the rest of the countries are actually non-English speaking. Okay, so we've been talking about all these terms. We've been talking about happiness, opportunities, chances, and let's extend that a bit more to what we mean by purpose and meaning to life. Because if we have to take opportunities for growth, opportunities for what makes us happy, that has to fit in what our purpose and meaning to life is. And that again, there, I'm not talking from my heart, I'm talking from my head, because the literature talks about it. So who are the main experts in this field? Who has talked to us about well-being? And the most important model over there is that of Maslow, 1962. He talks about well-being, and his most well-known theory over there is about the self-actualized person. This is a foreshadowing of another model we will talk about called the Perma Model, but the most long-standing model of what makes a person happy, what makes a person accomplished and fulfilled, is that of Maslow. And you might have come across Maslow's pyramid or hierarchy of needs in other literature as well. That's what we are talking about. So I've put it in a list over here from the least or the most basic factor of needs, the most basic needs which have to be fulfilled before people go on a higher stage. And then at the top of the pyramid, you have self-actualization. So firstly, our absolute basic needs are food and clothing, physiological needs. Those have to be fulfilled before we can start thinking about higher things in life. After physiological needs is safety. We want to be in a place where we can feel secure, and that can be about basic safety. It can also be safety in terms of personal security, having a secure job, knowing that your next meal is resource, that your next meal is secure. Then we start thinking about relationships and friendship. We have to belong to a group. We need love, we need acceptance, we need to be part of a network, a social network. Human beings are social beings, and we cannot live in isolation. There is a need. When we start with the physiological needs, we can be very much one person on their own. You need to fend for yourself first. But then as those basic needs get fulfilled, we start having the need for social networks. And then we go higher, being esteemed, being valued, having status, recognition, respect is something which is very human. We go beyond our physiological needs. It's important for us to feel that personal need to be recognized and acknowledged by the people around us, not just loved, but also respected. And then finally, the level of self-actualization, becoming the best that one can be. This depends on one's own needs, one's own realizations of what we are looking for in life. It depends on our strengths. It's not a one-size-fits-all at all. It's not about everybody being rich. It's not about everybody having the top job. It's not about everybody having a big house and a big car and children going to good schools. This can be very, very different for different people. And going back to what I was talking about right at the beginning, when we say that we want something, when we say that this is how we visualize achievement for ourselves, we have to look down, look into us very deeply to say, is that what I actually want? Or is that what I have been told from childhood, that this is what success looks like? And I want to be successful, and thereby I want these things because I've been told that success looks like this. But self-actualization is more than that success. It is what success looks like to us. And there can be another level beyond that, transcendence, when it's not just about a person becoming self-actualized. It's about going a step further and helping others fulfill their self-actualization, helping others make that step to understanding and recognizing themselves. And then we come to another model. As I said, the Perma model, And this was put forward by Seligman during his inaugural address as becoming the president of the American Psychological Association. And early back then, he was trying to talk about more well-being and positivity in life. This is looking at the theory of mental well-being is not just the absence of mental illness. It's not just the absence of pathology. So to shift from talking only about mental illness and pathology to saying that let people achieve the best, the good and positive in their life. It's not just enough to say, okay, you don't have a mental illness, but it's to say that you are mentally healthy. And think about an analogy with physical health. When we say that I'm feeling really healthy, I'm really feeling good within myself, it's not just that I don't have a physical health diagnosis. It's that I am a bit more than that. People can have no physical health diagnosis, and yet they might not be feeling the healthiest if they're always feeling tired, if they're always feeling a bit breathless from taking a few steps, if they can't seem to digest anything at all, if they're not having good sleep, which might not be down to a particular illness or a diagnosis, but still that general feeling of I'm not thriving. And whilst that can happen in physical health, it can happen in mental health as well. So I might not have a diagnosis, but at the same time, I might be at a stage where I feel I'm not thriving. And hence, going forward from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this model, the Perma model, talks a bit more about what are the positive factors in life that we can concentrate on, which help us actually recognize our needs, recognize who we are. And it's only then that we can look forward, we can actually identify the opportunities which are right for us. There might be the opportunity, the opening for a promotion coming in my department, but maybe that's not for me. That's not my career path. That's not what I want. And I've got to look out for something that fits my dreams, my aspirations. And how do we do that? So the PERMA model stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, the positive relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. So there you are, it's the PERMA model. Let's talk a bit more about all these factors in a bit more of detail. Positive emotion. Positive emotion is much more than happiness. It's about hope, about interest, about joy, about love, compassion, pride, amusement, gratitude. We sometimes do use the word happiness as a generic term for a lot of things, but the happiness that we experience when we pass an exam that we have been working hard for a long time is very different to the happiness we have when we think about, well, I've got a get together with friends in the evening. That happiness is very different from having got, let's say, a bargain in the sales. And that happiness is very different from the happiness that we feel in the success of the people we love, within our children, within our near and dear ones. So these are all positive emotions, but positive emotions are an important part of the PERMA model in trying to promote mental well-being. And then we have engagement. Engagement, according to Seligman's definition, is living in the present moment and focusing entirely on the task at hand. And for me, at least, that is very, very close to mindfulness. Again, a topic which is very widely discussed nowadays. So mindfulness is the basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we are doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. And I'll try to explain this with a few simple examples. Let's say you've gone on holiday And during the holiday, if you're always thinking of, well, the moment I get back to work, I've got these emails to answer, I've got these deadlines to meet, I've got such and such thing to do, I'll go back home, and these are the pieces of housework that I've got to catch up on before I get back to work in the office. And if you're always engaged on that, you're not enjoying the moment right now. When you're having lunch, if you're gobbling down your food and coffee in front of your emails, you're not even tasting your food. Just one of the simple joys of life. You're not even smelling that coffee. What's stopping us from taking at least those 10 minutes out in a day within a busy schedule to say, right, for these 10 minutes, I'm not going to think about anything else. For 10 minutes, the world can wait. For 10 minutes, I'm going to let that coffee swirl on my tongue and take the best out of it. For those 10 minutes, I'm going to read something that I enjoy. I'm going to taste my food. I'm going to enjoy those 10 minutes. So mindfulness is about enjoying what we are doing right now, instead of getting focused or drawn into things that we've got to do in future. And whilst, as I said, that this talk is not to give you the answers, this is to help you go on a quest for your own answers. There are some techniques, there are some small things which we can all reflect on, which we can all apply. And I think engagement, according to the Perma Model, or mindfulness, whichever way we term it, is one of those basic things which help us focus, re-engage, and enjoy every moment. And these are the moments which also help us in reflection. I think we sometimes get so drawn into deadlines, so drawn into the burden that is on us, and we keep on going through our lives like automatons, like zombies. We don't step back and think about, what is it that I want? What am I doing? Who am I doing this for? Who's getting happy because I've got a big salary and I've got a large house and I've got the newest and most fashionable clothes in my wardrobe? Who is it for? Who cares? And unless we care about it, if all our energies are spent on what other people care, what other people think about me, or what is it about living in future and the other moment, then we are losing something very deep within ourselves. And we run the danger of perhaps standing there somewhere 10, 15 years down the line, looking back and thinking, goodness, what did I lose? What did I stop thinking about at one point? So thinking is really important, and engagement, thinking in the present moment, savoring each of those seconds, is something that helps us ground immensely. Relationships, feeling supported, loved, valued by others. And as much as we can say that, we've got to think more about what we want, not what our parents want or our children want or what our friends want and our friends think. It's a balance. We do pay importance to relationships. We do want to be within positive relationships around ourselves. That's a no-brainer. You don't even need research to actually say that. But I'll tell you what the research does say. As a psychiatrist working in psychosis, working with schizophrenia, that's my bread and butter, that's my day job. And what does the research say in relationships over there? One of the most validated pieces of research and information within schizophrenia is that high expressed emotions, as they are technically called within a family, within family dynamics, have been shown unequivocally to increase relapse rates in schizophrenia. So the high expressed emotions are criticality, over involvement, negative comments. So it shows that it's not just about medication. Healing in schizophrenia has to be through positive relationships, through positive your networks around people as well. Within close family, if there is too much of criticism, too much of negative comments, and also over involvement, if people are getting overprotective, oh, poor you, I'm going to do everything around you, that doesn't help recovery. That doesn't help healing either. And so that's a solid piece of research that has been replicated over and over again, which makes family therapy really important in schizophrenia, along with the medication. And then coming to meaning. Meaning is, we could talk about meaning philosophically, spiritually for an entire day, entire week, and never finish. But coming back to Seligman's research about his theories over there, it's that intrinsic human quality to search for meaning and the need to have a sense of value and worth. This is not just about living day to day. I do my responsibilities, I do my jobs, I do what is expected on me, I've got food on the table, I provide for my family, and that's it. This is about serving something greater than ourselves, having a purpose in life, having a motivation to wake up and think, I mean something, not just to myself, but to society, to the people around me. I serve a greater purpose in life. And that meaning is very different. People pursue it through professions, social, political causes, maybe even family, creative endeavors, religious, spiritual beliefs. It could be found through careers, it can be found through extracurricular activities, it can be found through community activities, but we all need to find our niche. And it's got to be a niche that we are comfortable with. It must be a niche that comes naturally to us. It's not something about, parents having found a niche and then guiding all their children to join the same niche and go in the same direction and say, this is a great activity. We love it. We found fulfillment in life. You've got to try it as well. And their children might have something very different in mind or within themselves. So let people find their own ways, their own journeys. What is important for you might not be important for others. And whilst we can give people tips that this has worked for me, and so this might be an idea to explore, and I never thought this might work out, but it has worked out, so don't throw this idea away. You can give tips that way, but just saying that, for example, yoga is for everybody, or meditation is for everybody, or mindfulness as an exercise is for everybody, or even saying that everybody should be attending the gym a couple of times a week. No, and these are superficial things, but we've got to find our own niche, and that's not a very easy thing. It's a journey, as I said, a quest that we've got to give ourselves time for. And within our busy lives, when we've got enough of basic work-life balancing to do, it's not the easiest. And it's got to be guided by personal values. And coming back to the evidence over there, people who report having a purpose in life live longer, have greater life satisfaction, and fewer health problems. And I've given you the reference over here. There's one thing that I wanted to mention, and this slide is as good as any in mentioning that. I would say that whenever you read something along the lines of research says, or the literature says, always look up the references. There's loads of things on the internet which look very legitimate just because they are on a flashy website. And like Chinese whispers, one person starts saying it and then uses that website as reference, and then it kind of branches out. But nobody has actually done the research. Nobody has actually done the statistics and shown that something works. So before we believe anything, we have got to look at the proper evidence and research behind it. We might be surprised to find sometimes that there's very little to prove things beyond the opinions of people who have written them, and written them in a very eloquent way. I mean, I say you shouldn't be taking at face value what I'm saying today. Go and research it for yourself. Go and look into it for yourself. That's the very essence of what I'm trying to say over here. Make it your own journey and your own quest. And then the last point of the Perma model, accomplishment. A sense of accomplishment is the result of working towards goals, working towards an endeavor, feeling that you've reached the end of a journey, you've achieved a goal which you have been trying to do. And this contributes to a feeling of well-being, because individuals can have a sense of pride. They can have this sense of accomplishment, that they have done something meaningful with their lives. And sometimes we can look at exams as accomplishments, or we look at buying our first house as an accomplishment, or the fact that we have settled in life ultimately as an accomplishment. But sometimes those points can also be points of questioning ourselves, that, right, I've been driving to this point because that is what I have invested my life in. This is what people told me to do, my parents told me to do from childhood. And now I've done it. And then many people at that point think, was this what I really wanted? I've spent half my life doing this, but is this it? So accomplishments bring a lot more of satisfaction when they are planned, when it's done with the sense of, this is what I mean to do, and this is what I want to invest my life in. And as I say, the research has shown, but I've got the quotations here as well. You can go and look for those papers if you wish to. Research has shown positive associations between each of the PERMA components, and not just mental well-being, but physical health, vitality, job satisfaction, life satisfaction, commitment within organizations. And it's not rocket science. I think that's almost common sense. If I feel that my job is meaningful, if I feel that this is my strength, this is what I was meant to do, I was destined to do, I'm going to last out in it a lot longer than if I look at my job as something that just fulfills the bills at the end of the month, something that I get a salary for. So at the same time, if I'm feeling well within myself, I'm going to have more energy, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to be mindful of the food that I eat. That's going to help my physical health and vitality. I'm going to stay committed to my job. I'm not going to move from one job to the other, burning out and looking for something else. So obviously, PERMA has a basis. It's not just Seligman putting out a list that looks intuitively correct. It has been established by research that these components do work. And it's no surprise, a better predictor of psychological distress, in the sense that when people work on the components of PERMA, they get happy. But if they don't work on the PERMA components, there is more psychological distress. So it's not just about increasing well-being, but it's about preventing psychological distress as well. And then we talk about, let's talk a bit about values. In this quest, when we are talking about what exactly brings meaning to our lives. So we've talked about one of the components of PERMA being meaningfulness, in finding meaning and purpose in our lives. And that has to come through the values that we hold. And values is, again, something really deep, more than the day-to-day beliefs that we form about the news items we read, or what we believe about our friends, or the newest fad that is thrown into our belief system. Values is that entire aspect, that entire overview of what is important to us. So, and for example, if somebody grows up in a family or a system where, being honest, being not having criminal activities, being very law-abiding is really, part of their value system, that, if they had a criminal record, it would be a huge thing to them. Then that is part of their value system. And everything else that they look at, everything else they try and interpret in their lives are based on that value system. People can often use the value system, they can make their value system depending on the kind of religious, cultural, or spiritual background that they are coming from. And it creates that hierarchy of values. What is most important to me? Am I most important? Is my family more important? Or is it my responsibility which is more important compared to my personal happiness? And once we have this set of values, they can be quite difficult to break. And this is our comfort zone. As much as we can know cognitively that maybe something that I'm doing is not quite right, maybe something that I'm doing is not making me completely happy, breaking out of a value system is easier said than done. And that's why when people get CBT, when we're looking at cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of the beliefs about ourselves, about the world, about the way we interpret people's behaviors, what we see as good or bad, to us, how we judge people, it all depends on our value system. And that values clarification is very important before people embark on CBT, because their values can be very different to the values of the therapist. And it's something which is quite well entrenched in us. And again, something that we have to search for and understand before we find our personal meanings in life. Now, I was going to talk a little bit about a very interesting paper that I recently read. And I thought that there were some things in this paper which showed how important it is for us to have values, to have meaning in life, rather than not just values, but how we look at our future. And I've put the reference over here if any of you want to read it. It's quite a heavy paper, I will tell you. I've read it a couple of times, but I'm still trying to get my head around it. But I found some quotes in the paper which I thought was very relevant to our talk today. So within depression, the future changes from a realm of where I can to one where I cannot. So people looking at the future as hopeless, as unmotivating, as somewhere where nothing exists, when it's like a black hole, is quite an important feature of depression. We can go into cause effects over here about whether it's that hopelessness which creates depression, or depression makes people look at future this way, but there's no debate that it can become quite a vicious cycle. A future that takes the form of dread is equally explicit. So going from a future that doesn't exist, a future which is bland and like a black hole, is one thing. People can also have this future of dread. Everything's going to go bad. The absence of significant change. Every moment seems to go on forever. There's no possibility of reprieve. Nothing's going to change. And the author, Matthew Ratcliffe, puts it in another very eloquent way. I'll just get the important point from this slide over here. There is thus a blurring of the difference between the past and future, which further contributes to the experience of time as somehow static. If you listen to a dripping drain pipe for half an hour while waiting for a bus, the next few drops are experienced as much of the same rather than a departure from the past 30 minutes. Although the tap drips, nothing happens. And the analogy I'd like you to think about is, think about a life where people get up in the morning, they brush their teeth, they change their clothes, they make breakfast, everybody goes on to work, they come back, and then in the evening they have their meal, they watch TV, and they go to bed. And if that goes on forever and ever and ever, without looking for opportunities of change, without looking for that motivation, without looking for that meaning, even though on the surface everything looks perfect, as I said, lovely house, lovely meals, fashionable clothes, money in the bank, there is something missing over there. Now, very quickly about, as I said, no answers over here, but there can be a few things that we all can apply to our lives. We've talked about mindfulness. The other thing which does help people to identify opportunities is writing down their goals. It seems really, really simple, but again, very evidence-based, very much seen in literature, and this is the research background to it. People who write down their goals are clearly more successful in future. They achieve their goals a lot more than people who just keep it in their head. And I can vouch for myself over here. I've used it, not just actually reading that research. The first time I heard about it at a training session, I thought with pleasant surprise, that's something that I've done forever. It came naturally to me and it's worked. And so that's something that I would definitely say that people should try. And the other thing is the 6-step problem-solving model. Sometimes when life gets very complicated, we are looking for something to break the status quo. We seem to be at a stage that we can't break, and there are lots of problems. It is worth using the 6-step problem-solving model. I've put in one figure over here, but you can look on the net at, there are different models which define the steps slightly differently, but it's about stepping back and thinking, what exactly is the root problem? What is, if I had to put it in a single line, what would that problem be? Determine its cause. Think and develop potential solutions. When you sit back and write down what can be options over here, the options flow much easier than just thinking, I've got to find the one solution. And then from a set of potential solutions, you can select a solution which is a combination of different options. They can be one particular solution which actually stands out from paper, and then implementing that solution, coming back and evaluating, has it worked? Giving yourself a deadline. I'll come back a month later, I'll come back a week later and look at whether this has worked. And if it hasn't worked, then I'm going to try and find something else. So just summarizing over here, I think at the end of the day, discovering ourselves is the most important step. To be honest to ourselves, to think about what we exactly want from life, and that it is what we dream and aspire of, and what plays to our best strengths. And with that honesty comes a purpose, a motivation, a reason to live. And when we have that purpose, then we identify the right opportunities which are relevant for us. And they are unique opportunities made just for us, not for anybody else. And it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Looking forward to questions and discussion. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Nandini. That was an excellent presentation on happiness, and also great insight. The one point that I've made about is writing down goals definitely has worked for me personally, and I know it has for you as well. And I think certainly it would be something I would advise to everyone. And goals can change over a period of time. It will change, and sometimes goals, you have to revisit them, and it may not be what you perceived to be the goal, may not be achieved. So you may have to change that goal, change it to something else, or drop it to a lower priority. But yeah, for me, it has definitely worked as well. We've got a few questions. Before I go to the questions, that I wanted to ask you one question. I think that right at the onset, you said brain drain from the UK to other parts of the world, 3 countries above UK and 2 which are below. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, and then UAE and Ireland. did the research give us any reasons as to what for the why people wanted to move to those individual countries? Is it mainly money related, or was it which can cause happiness to different? So happiness obviously is different to different people. Money can bring joy and happiness to people, or the weather in Australia, for instance, can bring that. So, was there any sort of reasons being given?
First of all, just one thing, Ireland is above us in the happiness list as well.
Oh, okay.
So all four English-speaking countries are above us, and then you've got UAE, which is the happiest country of the Middle East.
Okay.
That's the only outlier. So the particular reasons, as you say, that's something that we want to research further. We don't have the exact answers. Again, we have our assumptions over there. And we had assumed that it would be money. We assumed that it would be perhaps work conditions. But the fact that they tally so much with the happiness list was a very interesting chance finding so far. And I think that happiness is, according to the factors over there, that freedom of life choices is quite an interesting thing. The point though is I have looked at the GDP list, and the GDP list does not tally with the happiness list much at all. There's some overlap, but it's quite clear over there that even though out of the 6 factors, GDP is a factor, the ranking order in GDP and the ranking order for happiness is completely in a different order. So money is definitely not the only factor, maybe to some extent, as we would think by common sense, but definitely more than that going on.
Right. Okay. So we've got quite a few questions, and I'll go through some of them. So I will start off with this question over here. So the first one is, why do psychiatrists prescribe so many medications and give hope of happiness to people?
Good. I think this comes back to our last couple of talks about the difference between mental illness and mental distress, isn't it? And it comes to a very basic distinction of what is biological depression and what is a reaction, a common emotional reaction to circumstances. So if people don't have biological depression, if they don't have depression as an illness, if they are simply dissatisfied with their lives, if they are unhappy within their circumstances, medication is not going to make a change. And psychiatrists would not ethically prescribe medications for everyone who says, I'm feeling unhappy. They shouldn't. And sometimes I would say that we see it both ways. It's not just doctors dishing out prescriptions. Sometimes we get it the other way of people wanting a quick fix as well. The number of people where I say that, look, I don't want to prescribe an antidepressant. I think you should be looking a bit deeper into yourselves and let's work on these. And they will say, no, I want an antidepressant. So, it works both ways, and there are more nuances over there than publicly known or acknowledged.
Okay, thank you. For the next question, the slide on meaning is very good. Details in making own journey is well articulated. Self-motivation is impacted with the current economic situation. Any suggestions or comments?
So, right. So, and this is the balance between us wanting to do something, feeling that the opportunities are not ripe or they're not at the moment, or circumstances have somehow taken away the opportunities that we would be striving for. I don't have a one size fits answer to this one, because circumstances of what people hoped for and just how exactly COVID and the lockdown impacted upon them can be very, very different. But I would say that the one model that could be used over here is possibly the problem-solving model, the 6-step problem-solving model, to have that clear thinking and write down of what is it that I exactly wanted to do and where exactly is the obstruction, identifying the problem, and then trying to find, okay, so this circumstance hasn't worked. What could be the other circumstances? We have to think about plan Bs. And sometimes perhaps what we dreamt of doing right now has not transpired, but there's always other options. There's okay, what has not materialized right now might still materialize in a couple of years, and I'll find something else to, to build myself to be even better within those years when that opportunity comes up again. That's the way of thinking about it.
Thank you. Next question, which is, why is it difficult to break out of our value system?
Because values are very entrenched. When we are talking about values, we are talking about something which is really, really deep within us. This is not something superficial. So when we grow up in a family where it says that, I might give some very superficial examples over here, because when you try and think about examples, they're all very superficial, mundane. Recording in progress. But they are all linked with the values. So let's say there's somebody within a family where it's very important that the family comes first, that they have never grown up in a system, which means that they have got to think about themselves. Now, that might mean that in future, if their aspirations and dreams match up with those of the people around them, then they might go through life without even noticing that there was a problem. But if their dreams and aspirations are at difference from what is expected by the family, they might go through their lives trying to satisfy, trying to make other people happy, because that is what their value system is, that you put other people forward, that you are always selfless. You've always tried to fulfill responsibility before you look at your own happiness. But then it might be that when they are in their 40s and 50s, they look back and they think, what have I done with my life? Values are, that's my only answer. They are entrenched. Because when we break values, sometimes we might consciously say, right, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I've read about it, I've thought about it, and for once I'm going to think about myself. We all get left with that little bit of guilt, because values is what we take to be our moral sense of the world. This is how we identify people as good and bad. And somehow breaking out of that value also deep within makes me a bad person. And it takes a long time to come out of that guilt and be really happy about what I have done. But not breaking out of it also leaves people with a sense of dissatisfaction. And what I've seen, and this might be my assumption, is people might not openly say that they are unhappy. They might put on the facade of, I've got everything in life, and, try and stress upon it more and more. Yes, I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy. But it comes out in other ways, the chronic pain, the lack of sleep, the something not quite going well, the feeling tired, all these telltale signs which are not outright depression, but an unhappiness that we fail to verbalize in other ways.
Okay, thank you. Next, well, this is information. Somebody's mentioned that some countries, and I think question mark on Oman, for instance, have a Ministry of Happiness. Madhya Pradesh has a Department of Happiness, and IIT Kharagpur has a Center for Research on Happiness. So I wasn't aware of that, but thank you for that bit of information. That's really good to know. Right, next question. Let me just have a quick look. Somebody's asking, why is Finland #1 in happiness and UK so low down? Again, that's the bit of research that you hopefully, when you're going to do that, or when the research is conducted, you will probably get an answer to that. I don't know.
No, yeah, I mean, that's not directly related to what I'm going to look at. We are going to look at only the migrant doctors and the
Right.
countries they are going to, and what's making them go there in a more qualitative sense. But why Finland has now been the winner on the 4th year in a row.
Yes, fourth.
Really. And it wasn't intuitive. People weren't expecting that at all. And the factors which seem to be big over there are life choices and the perception of a society which is non-corrupt, and people feel that they are being looked after. So in spite, you think about Scandinavian countries and you get this, sudden image of a set of very bleak, windswept countries, but no, they are absolutely smashing it. And I think there's a lot of write-up on the internet, but just be aware of the quality of research and the articles that you're looking at.
Right. I've got Jasmine, who's put her hand up. Jasmine, is there a question? If you want to put it on in the chat, and I've got Monica.
I want to ask them.
Yes.
I had a question about schizophrenia. Does that happen at birth, or is it something that occurs at the age of 30? Then can schizophrenia happen by verbal or physical abuse? My third question is happiness. Is there a diet that works? Because the schizophrenia has got to do with chemical changes. So I was wondering if there was a diet for that. And then happiness. When you said to keep a journal, do you have any idea where someone can look for samples or templates? Thank you. Excellent session. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I will clarify that schizophrenia is not, much within the remit of today's discussion. So I wouldn't like it to take up too much time, because schizophrenia is a serious mental illness. So it's not that if we promote happiness throughout and we achieve perfect happiness in a society, that schizophrenia is going to disappear. It won't. There's a large genetic basis to it, but within psychotic illnesses, we talk about the stress vulnerability model. So there's not a single gene that contributes to schizophrenia. It's multifactorial. It's got a combination of genes. And so to put it very simplistically, if the more genes people have which predispose to schizophrenia, increases their vulnerability, and the higher that vulnerability, the lower the degree of stress required to unlock it. So the vulnerability is something that people are, you could say, born with genetically, but then that gets shaped by childhood experiences, trauma, and it can be unlocked by a certain degree of stress at a certain time. Ages, there are peaks which happen at late teens, early 20s. There is another peak for 30s. And for females, there can even be a peak around 50s, 60s, late onset schizophrenia. About there being a diet, whether we are talking about happiness or whether we are talking about schizophrenia, again, lots of papers over there about essential fatty acids and healthy diets, etc. And I think there's nothing wrong with a healthy diet that looks at our metabolic functioning, and it prevents type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. And I think that's something that all of us should be mindful of, irrespective of our mental state and irrespective of whether we have a predisposition or vulnerability to schizophrenia. There is no, I would say, particular diet that leads to happiness. And I think sometimes we can overdo it. If we make our diet so restrictive that we will never eat a chocolate cake and never enjoy a bag of chips, I think there's even a term for it. Just as you talk about anorexia, you talk about bulimia, there is a term such as orthorexia, and that is being too correct about your diet. So whilst we don't want to live on takeaways, at the same time, I think never having anything that is seen as unhealthy is unhealthy in itself, I would say.
Thank you for that. I've got there's Monica who's got her hand up as well. Monica, do you want to just unmute yourself and ask the question?
Namaskar, Yalimada, to
Namaskar.
everyone. Thank you to the gentleman who referred to the IIT in Kharagpur back home. I have fond memories of my late father who passed away last year. I was just wondering about psychosis. As someone who has been on psychiatric medication for I would say well over 20 years now, with different diagnoses and different stages and all. If there is some control over the mood swings and the ups and downs to, you know, have some sort of middle ground, which eventually does get itself sorted out, because obviously your dosage has to be monitored and everything. Could psychosis be quite healthy in a way when it comes to creativity or just trying to work towards your goal in life career-wise? Could it ever be productive? And I'm really sorry I came on late, actually. I saw that your talk had already started. I was busy and I thought I must come on. So yeah.
Thank you, Monica. I hope you can catch up with the rest of the talk on YouTube, as Umeshji always puts it. And psychosis is a very wide topic. It's a wide rubric. You know, I mean, talking about psychosis is something like saying something about hepatitis, and hepatitis could be viral, bacterial, it could be alcoholic hepatitis. You're talking about a very, very large group of illnesses over here.
Right.
And whilst I am absolutely aware that there would be lots of people on social media who would not agree with my psychiatrist's view of psychosis, but I would say this, that my view of psychosis is not just medical. We are always taught in psychiatry to have a holistic model which includes biological, psychological, and social aspects.
Right.
Leaving psychosis untreated, I think, is dangerous. The only I could think about where psychosis could help or be creative is when people have bipolar with psychotic symptoms. Some of the manic episodes, they could show increased creativity, but by the time they have developed psychosis, they've gone beyond hypomania. They've gone into mania with psychotic symptoms.
Wow. Yes.
It would be, you know, quite dangerous to continue. Some very hypomanic, very early hypomanic episodes could be productive, but that's about it in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Monica, we've Nandiji had done a talk on psychosis last year, and that's on my YouTube channel. So if you want to have a quick look through that, it's there on the YouTube.
I look for Umesh Shah.
Umesh Shah London.
Umesh Shah London. I'll do that. Thank you very much. Thanks for organizing this.
Thank you, Monica.
Okay, Nandiji, there's a couple of questions. I know we are running out of time. I'm just going to take 2 or 3 more minutes of your time. And there's this question, which is in regard to happiness. What happens if you want to achieve a bigger, better things in life, for instance, a house, and willing to work for it as well, but the partner is satisfied with something that you already have and doesn't support? What happens to the happiness?
We're talking about a very specific circumstance over there, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
I think it boils down to the choice of what is more important. Is it the house or your relationship?
Yes.
And you know, about thinking, you know, do both of you want the same things in life? What does that mean for your relationship? That's something to explore. Lots of questions over there rather than answers. And ultimately, sometimes we don't have the perfect solution. We don't have the ideal answer, but we might have to settle for the best fit.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, last question, and then I promise that will be it. So there's this question which, and the person saying, when you say not being over involved in relationships, do you mean like detachment in spirituality?
No. I mean, the person who's put in that question, I wonder if you came midway through that slide. I'll explain once again. When I was talking about relationships, I said that when we look at the evidence of how relationships can impact on people, I couldn't help but mention that there is very, very strong evidence specifically in schizophrenia of high expressed emotions in relationships causing relapses. So something even beyond a biological sense, that relationships, if they are critical, if they show negative comments, and if they show over involvement, then they can impact on people's recovery, specifically in schizophrenia. It's not something, interestingly, it hasn't been replicated in other mental illnesses, not in depression, not in bipolar illnesses. It's a bit, 50-50 over there, the evidence. Specifically in schizophrenia, recovery, relapse rates are impacted on by high expressed emotions, and the three negative high expressed emotions are over-involvement, criticality, and over-involvement. So not being over-involved in that case definitely doesn't mean becoming detached and, kind of sacrificing families and becoming a monk over there. Not at all. The over-involvement that we see in some families, which is understandable, I know where the emotions are coming from, but it doesn't help, is when they try and wrap up the person with schizophrenia in cotton wool, that they become so involved that they don't let them grow, they don't let them take on adult responsibilities. It's all about overprotection at a very, very high level. So that was the context in which I was talking about in terms of over-involvement. I hope that makes more sense.
Thank you so much, Nandini. What an excellent presentation, and of course, an excellent set of questions as well. And thank you so much for clarifying and giving the answers to those as well. Nandini, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and we'll speak very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Namaste.
Nandaji, do you have a YouTube channel?
Hi, sorry, was that a question for me or a question for Nandini?
For Nandaji, I was just asking if she had a YouTube channel.
I don't think Nandini has got a YouTube channel.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Namaskar. Yali Madad, everyone. Bye.
No, I certainly don't have a YouTube channel. Only what other people put forward for me. Thank you, Mishji.
Bye.
Bye.